Lesson number 13 of Ethics, Governance and Sustainability. Firstly, let us look into the scope of this particular lesson on corporate social responsibility. It includes CSR and the difference between CSR and philanthropy, the concept of CSR as a contract with society, triple bottom line approach, CSR Voluntary Guidelines 2009, and VGS 2011, CSR under the Companies Act 2013, corporate citizenship, global principles and guidelines, few important ones, and finally the CSR audit. CSR versus philanthropy. Now, philanthropy means charity. So it basically means charity or benevolence for poor by way of donating money or by way of donating your time or any of the goods which you have. Like so day in day out many individuals do it. They donate money for patients who are suffering from ailments and for their operations and all we donate money, right? So that comes under the concept of philanthropy. So that is basically for a charitable cause. Right, charitable cause. So when you're doing charity, it means you're doing something good. So you're doing out of your option. So philanthropy is an option. So if a patient is dying and you're asked to contribute say 1,000 rupees, and if you're saying no, I won't, it's fine. No, it's upon you whether you give it or not. Even though it's a charitable cause, it's again an option. But coming to the concept of CSR, it is a responsibility. Okay, so CSR is a responsibility of the company to align its business or to align its values in terms of social causes, and by making sure it is ensuring inclusive development of its stakeholders, that is your investors, suppliers, employees, whoever it is. So inclusive development of such stakeholders along with the organization is what is CSR all about. So CSR is basically a responsibility of the company to make sure it is aligning its values in terms of certain social causes, and at the same time it is collaborating such values with that of the expectations of its stakeholders. So CSR and philanthropy are not one and the same. CSR is basically a responsibility, whereas philanthropy is a voluntary act. Okay, so a company might do certain philanthropic activities, but all such philanthropic activities cannot be categorized as CSR activities. Right? So this is about the CSR versus the philanthropy. CSR as a contract with the society. No, it is an acceptable principle, or you can say it is acceptable fact that a company is always dependent on its society wherever it is operating, right? So because for any activity of the company, it requires certain support from the community or some employees or whoever it is, or all of them form part of the society. So which means we can say they are mutually interdependent, because even for society to get to do for employment, they depend on the company, or for going forward for goods and services consumption and all, they require corporates, right? So in that sense, companies and society in general are mutually interdependent on each other, right? And this made sure that the continued existence of all such companies is based on an implied agreement between the company, that is the business, and the society. So when you're looking at a company going on working on a going concern basis, it implies that there is a kind of an agreement between the company and the society, which is an implied agreement because of which there is a continued existence of such company, where the society is not liking, or where the society is not in a position to entertain the activities of the company, then the company cannot go forward with its existence, right? Because we have seen many companies which have been shut down because of the local opposition, or because you can say because of the opposition from the local community, right? So here, and any continued existence of a company is because of an implied agreement between the company and the society, is what is this concept of CSR as a contract with the society, right? So many scholars have opined that the companies are licensed by the society to provide the goods and services which such society requires, right? So, the Constitution of India had granted the freedom of operation, or you can say freedom to do any business, right? So, this particular freedom of doing the business is again dependent on the kind of, the output delivered by such company, and how the company is able to draw a balance of its economic and social benefits in, and again on a comparison with that of how what the society is expecting from the company. So to summarize, CSR is the actual mode through which a company is letting the society know that it is caring for such particular society, right? And hence CSR is considered as a contract with the society, right? One important concept which we need to learn under this CSR is the triple bottom line approach. So what is the meaning of the word bottom line? Bottom line means the end or the object or the purpose, right? So for any business, what is the purpose? Profit is the purpose, but the triple bottom line approach. So here the triple means three. So three bottom lines is what every business should focus on, which means every business has something more to do than just making profits. What are those three bottom lines? Three bottom lines are the triple P approach, that is people, planet, and only then the profit. So profit is one of the bottom lines, it is not the only bottom line. So people, that is society, right? So people is nothing but society. So giving value towards the society, ensuring that your activities are not having a negative impact on the society are also supposed to be the bottom lines of an organization. Second, planet. By planet, we mean environment. So your activities should not cause adverse effect on the environment, and rather it shall ensure protection, conservation, and development of such environment is what the planet about. That is, your bottom line of having your company should make sure that it is taking into consideration the values of the environment, or you can say, the conservation, the importance of the conservation of environment is one such bottom line which every business entity should focus on, and only then your profits. So this is the concept of triple bottom line approach. So the concept of triple bottom line approach, to be summarized, if you summarize the concept of triple bottom line approach, it basically means that for any business there shall be three bottom lines, or you can say three objects. That is, number one, people, that is protection of society. So under society we have many things like human rights, or you can human rights, making ensuring corporate social responsibility towards the communities in which you are operating, right? And ensuring they have been provided proper labor rights. So whoever are the people engaged in your company, they have been provided proper labor rights. So all of this come under the one objective, that is people. Second, planet. So as said earlier, conservation, prevention, protection, and also development of environment comes under the ambit of the bottom line of planet. And finally your profits. So this basic principle is included under the concept of CSR, because that is the essence of a CSR. Under CSR, you are treating society and also environment on par with the profits of a business. So you do not consider that your CSR activity is something which is like over and above other companies which they do, or you not compare it with philanthropy kind of a thing. So it is on par with your profits. The kind of zeal a company has towards making profits, it should have the same zeal towards ensuring that it is protecting its people and the planet. So this is the concept of triple bottom line approach. Now let us look into the CSR Voluntary Guidelines 2009. So as the name suggests, it is basically guideline which are voluntary, which a company may adopt. So in the 2000, in the year 2009, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs has released this document on CSR Voluntary Guidelines 2009. So this stipulated that every company shall come forward with formulation of a CSR policy, and it shall provide a roadway for such CSR initiatives, and it shall ensure that CSR is made an integral part of its business policy, and such CSR shall be aligned with the business goals of the company, right? So the important thing to be remembered under CSR voluntary guidelines are, there are six core elements which have been identified under these guidelines. So which, again, which we'll be looking in the next slide. So Before that, one other point which we need to remember is that the CSR policies per se shall be approved by the board. And all these things have now been made mandatory under the Companies Act 2013. So 2009 they were voluntary guidelines, but under the 2013 they have become mandatory. So what are the six core elements? Let us look into it now. Six core elements are: number one, care for all the stakeholders. So it's not just the shareholders. Beyond the shareholders, you need to go and make sure every stakeholder is taken care of. Ethical functioning of each and every department, each and every functional unit of the company. You need to respect your workers' rights and ensure the welfare safety of your workers. Respect the human rights of whosoever you're dealing with. You may deal with any individual per se during the entire course of business, right? So ensure that their human rights are also respected. Respect the environment and ensure that you are making certain you are undertaking certain activities which are for social and inclusive development of the society. So these are the six core elements which have been identified under CSR voluntary guidelines. So this particular slide is important. So under the Companies Act 2013, so this is one technical thing under this particular chapter. So section 135 of the Companies Act 2013 deals with the CSR. So under this, there is one important thing which you need to remember. So usually students get confused here. So the Companies Act under the section 135 subsection 1 has given or stipulated criteria only for constitution of a committee. This criteria is not for spending money on CSR. So you spend money on CSR only when you make certain profits. Unless you make profits, you cannot spend anything on CSR, or you need not basically spend anything on CSR. Whereas this particular criteria of net worth, turnover and net profits is only for the sake of constitution of a CSR committee. So remember this. So what is this particular criteria? Net worth more than or equal to 500 crores, turnover more than or equal to 1000 crores, or net profits of more than or equal to 5 crores. If you have any of these three during any financial year, right? So this is the scenario till September 2018. However, after September 2018, as per the Companies Amendment Act 2017, the words any financial year have been removed and they have been replaced by the words during the immediately preceding financial year, which means for every year we need to look into which, these three criteria, whether the company has net worth of 500 crores or not, or turnover of 1000 crores or not, or net profit of 5 crores or not. We need to look into this three. Only when it has it, then it has a mandatory provision for constitution of a CSR committee. Okay, and once a CSR committee is constituted, and if for the next 3 years this criteria is not being met, then you need not comply with the regulations provided for CSR Act committee. However, once a committee is constituted, for the first 3 years of it, you shall ensure that all the regulations pertaining to CSR committee have been complied with by the company. Okay, so this is what is basic provision for CSR committee. So under CSR committee, the composition of it is very clear. So there shall be at least three or more directors, of which at least one shall be independent director. So that is a simple composition provided for CSR committee. However, there are three exceptions which are given because of certain exceptional scenarios. Because under CSR, it is any company, it is not a public, private, or a foreign company. Any company which has met with the criteria as we have seen, they need to comply with having a CSR committee. Hence, in such committee, in such company where there is no requirement of appointment of an independent director, this is exempted. So you can have your CSR committee without even such independent director. Second, if it is a private limited company where there are only two directors on the board of such private limited company, in such cases as well, you need not have a three-member board. So you can these two members of the private limited company can make or can constitute a CSR committee. And finally, a foreign company which has been covered under these rules, in such case, the composition has been different. So what is the composition? The composition is at least two persons. One such person is the person who has been nominated under the Companies Act to receive notices on behalf of the foreign company who is a resident in India, and another person, whosoever it may be, whoever has been nominated by such foreign company. So these are the three exceptions, sorry, not exemptions, but exceptions, right, provided under the CSR committee. Okay. Now, so what is the role played by CSR committee? Even for the role, there are three roles which have been played by CSR committee. Number one, to formulate and recommend the CSR policy for approval for the board of directors. Number two, to recommend the amount of expenditure to be spent for CSR activities. And finally, to monitor such CSR policy. So these are the three main roles played by a CSR committee, and this is about the CSR committee. So CSR is basically a comply or an explain approach. So what does it mean? So the Companies Act stipulates that whenever you have profits, like basically from the average net profits made during any three preceding financial years, which are three immediately preceding financial years, the average of such net profits, you compute it as per section 198 and apply 2% of it. That would be the minimum spend of CSR which is stipulated under the Companies Act. However, if a company fails to spend such 2% of the average net profits made during the three immediately preceding financial years, then such company shall specify the reasons for the same, for the reasons for not spending such amount in its board's report, right? So this is about CSR comply or explain approach. So the approach is the comply or explain. Either comply by spending 2% of the average net profits made during the immediately three preceding financial years, or explain why you haven't spent such amount, and the same explanation shall be reflected in the board's report. Now let us briefly discuss on the concept of implementation agency for CSR. So CSR activities can be implemented by the company either on its own or in collaboration with any other company, which is fine, right? However, in case you want such CSR activities not to be implemented by your own people but by any third party agency, or you can say by any other implementation agency, that can only be a section 8 company or a registered trust or a registered society, and the same should have been established by the company itself, either singly or along with any other company, or the central government or the state government. And in case it is not a section 8 company or a registered trust or a registered society which has been established by the company along with any other company or singly or the central government or state government, it can be any other entity established under an act of the parliament or state legislature. So these are the only implementation agencies which are allowed. However, if you want to implement your CSR activities through any other section 8 company or any other registered trust or any other registered society which are not established by the company either singly or in collaboration with any other company, or which are not established by central government or state government, you can still do it through private parties. So there are many section 8 NGOs which have been run by private parties through which corporates make sure the CSR activities have been undertaking. Such kind of a third-party implementation agencies are also allowed, however, subject to one condition, that such registered trust or registered society or a Section 8 company should have minimum 3 years of track record in such CSR activity. That is the only condition, right? So this is the concept of implementation agency. So corporate citizenship and corporate social responsibility are two words which are used interchangeably by many scholars. Now, there is no particular definition for corporate citizenship, but the essence of corporate citizenship is that even corporates should treat themselves as citizens, and they need to ensure that they are having such fundamental duty towards the society. Because as a citizen, we know how to ensure and how to make sure our activities are not impacting our neighbors, or not impacting any of the other human beings, right? Similarly, corporates should treat themselves as citizens and ensure they are part, like they need to believe that they are part of the society, and they need to provide the same kind of responsibility and duty towards the society. There is one Center for Corporate Citizenship Research, which has come up with a particular definition for corporate citizenship, which is seen here in this on the slide. So it says that it is a recognition that corporate citizenship itself is a recognition that a business has social, cultural, and environmental responsibilities to the community in which it operates. In addition to and along with the economic and financial responsibilities it owes its shareholders. So along with the economic and financial responsibilities which it has to provide towards its shareholders or any other stakeholders, in addition to it, it also has certain social, cultural, and environmental responsibilities towards the community. And the depiction of it is nothing but corporate citizenship, right? So what is the goal of such corporate citizenship? The goal is to establish relationship between the community, the business, and philanthropic activities so as to complement and supplement each other. So the community is benefiting the business benefits the communities, and in order to ensure that it is having responsibility towards such communities, it engages itself into more of philanthropic activities and other social responsible activities, right? So this is the concept of corporate citizenship, and that is the source. So that's corporate citizen research unit has defined this term corporate citizenship. Remember this meaning, which is helpful. Now let's look into a few global principles and guidelines. The one, the United Nations Global Compact. So we will be discussing this in detail in the sustainability reporting framework chapter on it. The United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights are those guidelines which guide the businesses as to how they shall protect the human rights, right? So businesses interact with individuals on one or the other scale. So how do they protect such human rights is what these guidelines are about. The OECD guidelines on multinational enterprises stipulate that, basically whenever any company, a multinational enterprise is nothing but an enterprise which has its business in more than one country, correct? So if you are responsible corporate citizen in one country, but in other countries wherever you're setting up your business, you are not the same equally responsible in such other countries just because they are not the countries of your origin. It is something which is not acceptable. So as a multinational enterprise, wherever it be that a company is setting up its business, it shall have equal responsibility towards that particular society wherever it is operating. And these three standards, A1000, SA 8000 and ISO 26000, we'll be discussing it in the subsequent slides. And the Global Compact Self-Assessment Tool is a tool consisting of 45 questions wherein each question is evaluated on a scale of 3 to 9. And this is to assess oneself as to how they are impacting how they are complying with the 10 principles identified under the UNGC. So under the UNGC, there are 10 principles which have been identified, which we'll be discussing in detail. And the assessment as to how a country or how a company is actually complying with such 10 principles is being assessed through this tool, and this is completely self-assessment and not an external assessment. Now let us see the three standards. A1000 series of standards. So AA stands for accountability. Accountability. So accountability 1000 series of standards are of three types. One, accountability principle standard. Second, assurance standard. And third, stakeholder engagement standard. Okay. So these basic standards are dependent, or you can say, or based on three major principles. That is, one, inclusivity, second, materiality, and third, responsiveness. So here, to summarize, accountability standards are basically confined only in terms of how a corporate is accountable towards its activities, right? And in such cases, if a corporate has to be accountable for its activities, it should firstly ensure that throughout its activities, it is including in its aims or in its focus or in its targets the benefits of the society as well. Second, it is considering material events, the disclosure of such material events and ensuring transparency in such materiality. And finally, responsiveness towards any of the grievances made by any of the stakeholders. If it is complying with it, it means it is trying to be accountable towards its activities. If not, it is not accounted. The accountability standard is not being maintained by such company. Okay, so this is one very important series of standards which are certified on a particular organization, right? So this is about A1000 series of standards. SA 8000 standard. So what is this SA 8000 standard? So SA 8000 is about the social accountability 8000 standard. This is basically based on a international labor organization, international and national law conventions. So the principles identified under these conventions are compiled under this particular standard, and this standard is basically to ensure the companies adopt, whoever are the companies which are adopting this standard will also comply with such particular standard. And this standard majorly focuses on the protection of the basic human rights of the workers, right? So this is very important, which you need to remember. It is the protection of basic human rights of the workers. This is a key point under SA 8000 standard, which will be reflected in your answer, right? And this particular standard, SA 8000, has 9 basic elements, which include abolition of child labor, abolition of forced and compulsory labor, maintaining proper health and safety conditions for the labor, that is workers. Next, freedom of association of the workers, right of collective bargaining, right to collective bargaining, that is, asking for some kind of a collective benefit. So no discrimination among the workers, disciplinary practices. So in case there is some kind of an, some kind of a activity which a worker does which is totally against the principles or policies, then he can be punished for some disciplinary action. Next, working hours, regulation of working hours, ensuring they are not over exploited. Proper remuneration and equal remuneration is something like minimum wages and the equal remuneration as have to be complied with. The management system shall be in such a manner which ensure that the protection of workers is always ensured. Okay, so these are the 9 basic elements of this particular standard SA 8000, which I know of these 9, at least few basic elements which you need to remember and reproduce in your exam, right? Now the ISO 26000 standard. So what is this ISO 26000 standard? So ISO 26000 standard is with respect to the social responsibility, and this is basically a guideline from the International Standard Organization. It's not a certification, right? So it's only a guidance which is given, which will enable the organizations or all the businesses to understand the meaning and understand or the significance of social responsibility or a corporate social responsibility, right? And it covers 6 core areas of social responsibility which are important. Number one, the human rights, labor practices, environment, fair operating practices, consumer issues, and community involvement and development. So the ISO 26000 states that if an organization is ensuring that all these 6 core areas of social responsibility are imbibed, or if these 6 are forming part of a company's, or if the 6 are forming part of an organization's business, in such cases such organization can be regarded as a socially responsible corporate. Okay, so this particular standard is not certifying that this organization is a socially responsible organization, but it is giving a guideline to the organization. So whichever are the organization which are looking at making themselves corporate social responsible organizations, such organizations can go through this ISO 26000 standard, which will give a guidance through 6 core areas as to how they can be socially responsible. Okay, so remember the 6 core areas, which is very important for you as from the examination point of view. And finally, the concept of CSR audit. So what is a CSR audit? CSR audit, as the name suggests, is an audit to look into how the company's practices in terms of CSR I mean, as per the CSR policy, and the company's activities as the CSR activities, how are they effective, and the effectiveness of such activities is what is audited under the CSR audit. So it is not a traditional audit of finance. So the kind of inputs given in this audit will be totally different, right? So in this audit we will basically know the level of actual implementation of the CSR policy and the commitment of the management towards such implementation as well, right? So this CSR audit need not be a separate audit by someone, it can be as a internal audit. So under the internal audit, the scope of audit, you can also include CSR as one of the scope of such internal auditor, which will help the company to understand as to how serious or as to how committed the company is towards its CSR activities, right? And finally, it's as understood, there is no applicability of financial audit to a CSR audit. So there the techniques and the principles which you adopt for a CSR audit shall be entirely different from that of a financial audit. So this is about a CSR audit. So before we conclude, let me give you one important tip in terms of this particular paper. So do not focus more on remembering things under each topic. Try to remember or try to recollect or try to connect the name of the topic with that of the provisions under the topic, and try to give your own inputs in your examination paper, because more or less all these topics are views of one or the other author. So the whatever I told you are the views of myself, right? My own views are something which I'm sharing with you. Similarly, as a student, you will have your own view in terms of a particular topic. Try to get it on your mind and try to make sure that is reflected in your paper, right? And the standards, the standards which we have discussed are something which are probably which have more probability of being asked in the paper. Okay, all the best. Thank you.